The year is 151. For more than 7 years, the Gothic sector has been set ablaze by the forces of chaos. Abaddon's 12th Black Crusade has crushed all in its path. The beleaguered Admiral Ravensburg, cut off from the wider Imperium by vast warp storms, has held the line against all expectations. 3 of his precious Blackstone fortresses had already been claimed by the Despoiler through arcane means, leaving the remaining 3 vulnerable and exposed. Faced with inevitable defeat, the valiant admiral wagered the survival of the entire Gothic sector and went on the offensive. Having rid himself of the many pirates plaguing his rear lines, Ravensburg was now ready to throw everything he had at the War Master. For better or worse, the Gothic War was drawing to an end. But fresh wars and adventures await eager admirals in a less grimdark universe, that of Asimov's Foundation series, thanks to our sponsor, Foundation Galactic Frontier. This is a brand new free-to-play game on PC and mobile that puts you at the helm of a custom-made starship and lays out a massive universe to explore. Inside the ship, you'll be handling the design of the craft, crew assignments, research, resource management, and tactical preparations. Outside, there are dangers and delights to engage with as you explore and fight your way to the top through PvE and PvP combat. That's both with your ship in space and with your hero squad on the surface of the planets you discover. You can also form or join guilds and partake in large guild wars. But the most exciting part is getting to explore the Foundation universe, territory rarely trod on anything like this scale. Get immersed in the world and meet legendary characters from the novels and recent TV adaptation like Harry Seldon, Mule and Demerzel, with new original storylines bringing them and you into historic events. This game is brand new and it's all there to explore right now. So dive into Foundation Galactic Frontier for free at our link below or with the QR code on screen. And get off to a better start by using our code WIZARDS to grab a load of in-game rewards for free. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon the Despoiler was enraged. For nearly a decade, he had bent all his power and might against the feeble followers of the Corpse Emperor, to no avail. Worse still, it was not a mighty Space Marine captain that had stood up to him, but a mere unaugmented, unimportant mortal man. Now this impudent corpse-worshipping slave had the gall to strike back, instead of accepting his place in the galaxy and dying with the rest of his kind. Abaddon's millennia of military experience and pride as an Astartes warrior could not accept such a slight. Von Ravensburg, however, had no time to make this fight personal. He and his trusted captains had analysed the situation and drawn up their battle plans. The Gothic sector was infested with more Chaos fleets than mutants in an underhive. Together they outnumbered Battlefleet Gothic to an impossible degree, yet the War Master had seen fit to scatter them across the sector. Whether Abaddon had done so to maximise his reach, or to avoid any of his lieutenants from gaining too much power, was unknown. Ravensburg, however, aimed to take advantage of the situation. He gathered every single space-worthy vessel he could spare, with the aim to engage the isolated flotillas one by one. This strategic decision was very much a do-or-die situation. It weakened the entire sector, and sacrificed precious worlds, supply lines and dockyards to the predations of chaos. While the Admiral would be engaging one enemy fleet, the rest would have free reign across Imperial systems. Unless Ravensburg could produce immediate results, this could very much spell doom for the Loyalists. For months, the Admiral poked and prodded his foe, desperately trying to orchestrate the perfect engagement for his remaining ships. The Chaos fleets, however, had no interest in tangling with such a hard target. After a supreme effort of patience and self-restraint, bought with the blood of countless Imperial citizens left to their own devices, Ravensburg's scout ships finally reported good news. A massive Chaos fleet, commanded by Lokkis Vanama, was making for the Gethsemane system. Lokkis was one of Abaddon's top lieutenants, and his death was of the highest priority to the Imperials. At last, Ravensburg had a unique opportunity to finally seize what he wanted. He would not let it slip away. Taking personal command of his battle group for the first time in the Gothic War, the Admiral set a course for Gethsemane aboard his flagship, the Divine Right. Upon first encounter, it was obvious to Lokkis that Ravensburg's force was a serious threat he would rather avoid. The Loyalist fleet doggedly followed its prey. Both admirals employed all their artifice and seamanship to either maintain or break contact with the other. Ravensburg surmised that his foe was attempting to get far enough from the Gethsemane system to perform a warp jump and escape. In the face of this retreat, The Admiral's Voidsmen were quick to mock the cowardice of their foe. From the highest decks of the Loyalist warships to the lowest vermin-infested bilges, hopeful rumours began to circulate among the crew. Overzealous ecclesiarchy priests and commissars encouraged them eagerly. These were vultures rather than warriors who fled at the first sight of battle. Victory through the God Emperor was assured. Ravensburg himself knew better. The Admiral sent advanced detachments ahead of his main force to hound Lokkis Vanama. This advanced force was composed of fast escort vessels that harassed the enemy and prevented their complete escape. However, after weeks of chase across the void of space, Lokkis showed why he was one of Abaddon's favoured lieutenants. As the Imperial advance force kept harassing their target, a trap was suddenly sprung. Seemingly out of nowhere, a second Chaos fleet appeared, hitting the Imperial Vanguard vessels from the side. No doubt the Chaos Lord had drawn inspiration from Chagorian tactics, for at the same time, Vanama's forces wheeled about and engaged their pursuers. The hunter had become the prey. Yet, if the heretics thought this would be enough to deter Battlefleet Gothic, they were about to be disappointed. It was a testament to Ravensburg's abilities as a leader that he could always rely on competent and loyal subordinates to carry out crucial operations with no direct supervision. The Imperium's vast armies were too often crippled by corrupt and scheming megalomaniacs who surrounded themselves with sycophants rather than warriors. Ravensburg, however, was of a different stock, and had, as such, produced an impeccable fighting force. And the quality of Battlefleet Gothic would once again be shown during the events of the decisive Battle of Gethsemane. The hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned Imperial Vanguard did not panic at this sudden change of events. They rallied together and beat an organised fighting retreat to the safety of their main force. Several vessels were lost during this engagement, but amazingly, the Loyalists gave as good as they got, claiming just as many enemy ships. Catastrophe had been averted. The proper battle could finally start. Ravensburg, though outnumbered, could not afford to back down. If he played his cards right, he would win this fight thanks to his few but formidable battleships, which formed the backbone of his fleet. Although slow and cumbersome, they were capable of apocalyptic levels of destruction if used correctly. For 3 days, both admirals danced around each other, sending out their scout ships while hiding their main forces in the vastness of the void. Neither wanted to risk a fight without a decisive advantage. Much like a long-forgotten naval battle of Terra's mythical 20th century, whichever fleet located the other first would have the upper hand. Yet fortune favours the righteous. 6 Imperial escort vessels used a nearby nebula to hide themselves. From there, they finally managed to spot the bulk of the enemy forces near Gethsemane 2 and relayed the information back to the fleet. At once, Ravensburg pounced with everything he had. His priority was to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage and ensure an optimal engagement for his battleships. As the Loyalists were still closing in on their astounded foe, the order was given to launch torpedoes. These slow-moving weapons had little to no chance of hitting at such vast distances, but that was not their point. Aimed around the enemy formation rather than at it, they forced the Chaos vessels to move closer together. Ravensburg had just created a barrel full of fish. Though a well-known tactic in void warfare, it required perfect timing and the element of surprise to work properly. Ravensburg had seen to both. At once, the Imperial battleships took the center and engaged the Chaos Armada in a slugging match of lance batteries and macro cannons. The opening stages of the Battle of Gethsemane were disastrous for the forces of Chaos. With each scored hit, the Loyalists avenged years of slaughter and atrocities. With each loaded shell, the brave crewmen of the Imperial Navy chanted the names of fallen comrades or lost kin. Captain Compel Bast, the hero of the Aura raid, once again distinguished himself by scoring first blood against the traitors. While the Imperial ships of the line tore the enemy to shreds, the escorts guarded the flanks. They kept the enemy penned into the battleship's Killzone, giving Ravensburg the perfect engagement he had worked so hard for. The Battle of Gethsemane was fought at point-blank range for Void standards. At the climax of the battle, Ravensburg ordered his ships to break the line. Splitting the enemy fleet in two, the Imperial battleships, accompanied by their escorts, went through the enemy formation. Timing their shots to perfection, the Loyalist captains ordered their gun crews to unleash everything they had. Through sustained broadsides that could shatter hive cities, the Imperials spewed death in every direction. Though their losses were high, by the time Ravensburg's ships came out the other side, the enemy fleet was all but gutted. Ravensburg wheeled around to re-engage, intent on slaughtering every single traitor. Yet Lokkis had had enough. What remained of his armada sped ahead rather than wheel to face its foe. To ensure his escape, the canny Chaos Lord launched mines to break Ravensburg's pursuit. Though soundly defeated, it looked as though Abaddon's lieutenant would live to fight another day. That was until another flotilla entered the field of battle. Arriving with the characteristic suddenness of their race, a mighty Eldar warfleet appeared near Gethsemane too. At first, the Imperial captains panicked at this sudden turn of events. To see so many Eldar ships assembled for open warfare was beyond rare. Many officers immediately urged Ravensburg to fire at the fickle Xenos. Inquisitor Horst, however, advised patience and caution. His words of wisdom were vindicated when the arrogant aliens hailed the Imperials and joined the hunt at their side. Falling upon the remnants of the Chaos forces, they slaughtered them to a man, with all the cruelty of a feline playing with its prey. As the Loyalist Voidsmen cheered on at the unexpected sight, Ravensburg spared a thought for Admiral Spire, whose diplomatic approach during the pirate campaign had doubtlessly facilitated the Eldar's assistance. With the destruction of the Chaos fleet and the death of Lokkis, the Battle of Gethsemane was over. It was the first devastating defeat the Chaos forces had suffered during the Gothic War, and a stunning success for Ravensburg's daring gamble. News of the triumph spread far and wide, rekindling hope across the sector. Though none knew it yet, this was the moment when the tide would finally turn in favour of the Emperor's faithful. Ravensburg himself, however, was sombre. Though this victory would forever cement his legacy, regardless of the war's outcome, it had come at great personal cost. His son, Manfred, had perished during the engagement, tainting an otherwise triumphant day. As if the Emperor himself blessed this great victory, the warp storms isolating the Gothic sector finally subsided in late 151. A few months after the decisive battle, the first Imperial reinforcements from nearby sectors finally entered the fray. Among them stood many detachments of Space Marines. The White Consuls, founded to guard the Eye of Terror itself, were the first to arrive. The Exorcists, expert demon hunters, also sent elements of their chapter. The reclusive Red Talons, often used by the High Lords of Terror to hunt renegade Space Marines, were also fully present. Finally, the secretive Angels of Redemption offered their support, backed by the full might of the Unforgiven chapters. By late 151, it was clear the tide had changed. Despite overwhelming military superiority and the backing of the Dark Gods, Abaddon had utterly failed to break the isolated Gothic sector. Now, the full might of the Navis Imperialis and the combined strength of multiple sectors had come to punish him for his arrogance. And all thanks to the heroic actions of a mortal Lord Admiral and his loyal crew. Still, Abaddon would not accept defeat. He had 3 Blackstone fortresses and the Planet Killer to back him up. He first directed his wrath at the Taranis sector, a crossroads for Imperial reinforcements. Combining the firepower of his 3 fortresses, he fired upon the system's star, making it go supernova. Hundreds of billions of innocents, unable to evacuate in time, died in the worst genocide of the war. As long as the despoiler still drew breath, this conflict was far from over. Ravensburg had to protect the remaining 3 Blackstone fortresses and defeat Abaddon in combat. But which fortress would the War Master target? This time it was the Eldar who would give him a solution. After months of fruitless Imperial search, the Xenos put their incomprehensible techno-sorcery to good use. Several Eldar stealth ships located and tracked Abaddon's fleet. His bearing was relayed to Ravensburg. The archenemy was making for Schindelgheist, where Blackstone 5 was located. The final battle of the Gothic War would be fought there. Ravensburg gathered every single vessel he could spare and linked up with the equally massive Eldar fleet. Doubtlessly through the mediation of Admiral Spire, who took part in this final campaign, the Xenos showcased unheard-of levels of cooperation. In a stunning display of trust, the aliens allowed the Imperial Navy to make use of their secret webway gates. Being the main way the Xenos still evaded extinction, the webway was their most well-defended possession. One can only guess how desperate the craft worlders were to keep the Blackstone fortresses away from the forces of chaos. After all, as their original creators, the Eldar knew better than anyone how dangerous they could be in the wrong hands. Through the invaluable help of their unlikely allies, the Imperials made it to Schindelgheist 5 days before the War Master. Ravensburg and the Eldar would put that time to good use, orchestrating a trap the despoiler would not soon forget. 5 days later, the board was set. Abaddon arrived in system in full force, fully secure in the presumption that Ravensburg was hundreds of thousands of miles away. It must have been the greatest surprise the War Master had experienced in 10,000 years when his fleet was set upon by the combined forces of the Imperium and the Eldar. The Battle of Schindelgheist had begun, and once again, Admiral Ravensburg would fight it on his own terms. For the first time of the 12th Black Crusade, the Loyalist fleet outnumbered their foe. It was a welcome change of pace for the Imperials and the Eldar to finally find strength in numbers. Yet even though outnumbered, Abaddon was certainly not outgunned. He had 3 Blackstone fortresses and the Planet Killer at his side. For 3 days, the battle raged, with massive casualties on both sides. By the 3rd day, however, the outcome was clear. Abaddon, War Master of Chaos, had finally been bested. No matter what he did, he could not win this engagement with this confounded mortal. Yet he was not out of options. Earning once again his nickname, the Despoiler ordered his 3 fortresses to break away from the engagement and make for the star of the Schindelgheist system. If it went supernova, the Imperials would have to disengage, allowing Abaddon to escape unopposed with his prize. Ravensburg immediately understood his foe's intention and ordered all his ships to intercept the enemy. No matter how much punishment the Imperials dished out, however, it was no use. The fortresses were just too strong. Linking once again their power, the 3 Talismans of Vol targeted the star. It was at this moment, where all hope had faded, that a supreme act of valor saved the Imperials. Captain Abridal, one of Admiral Spire's subordinates, sailed his ship, the Flame of Purity, straight into the middle of the converging beams of energy. With a final prayer to the Emperor, the vessel was lost with all hands, reduced to atoms in an instant. Abridal's sacrifice, however, had not been in vain. Schindelgeist's son had been saved, and Abaddon's defeat had well and truly been cemented. It would take hours for the fortresses to recharge their spent energy, but the War Master had simply run out of time. After insistent urgings from his captains, the Despoiler was forced to face reality. The 12th Black Crusade was over. He had lost. Now was the time to cut his losses and escape before this defeat turned into a disaster. Ordering a full retreat, Abaddon managed to escape with only 2 of his Blackstone fortresses. The 3rd was surrounded and boarded by the Angels of Redemption. The War Master had been sent packing, in arguably the greatest defeat of his military career. The Gothic sector stood strong, and out of 6 Talismans of Vol, he had only captured 2. There was simply no way to rationalize this campaign in any other way. After a decade of slaughter, Ravensburg had come out on top. A mere mortal had succeeded where the greatest heroes of the Imperium had failed for 10,000 years. In honor of this great victory, the High Lords ordered the creation of a grand monolith in the Imperial Palace of Holy Terror itself. Upon its blessed surface, the name of every single participant in the war, from Ravensburg to the lowest merchant deckhand, was engraved for eternity. Although Abaddon was finally out of the picture, it would take years for the fighting to stop. Many Chaos champions fled with their master back to the Eye of Terror, but many more opted to stay. They reaved across the stars for years, before finally being tracked down and destroyed. The Gothic sector itself was ravaged, and would need centuries to recover. More worryingly, however, was the fate of the Blackstone fortresses. After Ravensburg's decisive victory at Schindelgheist, every single Loyalist Blackstone fortress mysteriously self-destructed. No one could offer an explanation as to why, and no one could verify the state of Abaddon's own Blackstone fortresses. It was hoped that, wherever they now were, they had met with the same fate. No one could bear the thought of the Despoiler having access to such awesome weaponry. Yet this terrible question would not be answered for centuries. Not until the fateful events of Abaddon's last and greatest Black Crusade, the 13th Black Crusade. For now, however, the Imperium stood triumphant. Now was the time to bury the dead and honor their sacrifice. No matter what the warp threw at them, Admiral Ravensburg had proven to all faithful souls that it is better to die for the Emperor than to live for yourself. And special thanks to Foundation Galactic Frontier, a new adventure in the Foundation universe. Get it for free on PC or mobile with our link below or QR code, and use code WIZARDS for some bonus rewards. Our series on the rise and fall of Abaddon the Despoiler will soon continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.